It was a blessing.
Major blessing. Because I would have stopped practicing an hour and a half, 2 hours, and went on. But Tourette syndrome said, nah, got something else for you. It took an enormous weight off my shoulders because all of that time I was never truly comfortable with the explanation. People looking at you strange, not being able to have an adequate explanation for it.
Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf once said something that stops you in your tracks. He called one of his opponents his GOAT. Not Michael Jordan, not Magic Johnson. One of the 5 defenders who made his life absolute hell every single night. That tells you everything about the level of competition Abdul-Rauf faced in the 1990s. This wasn't a guy who got shut down easily. He dropped 51 points on one defender and 32 on another. But these 5 players earned something rare from him. Respect. Abdul-Rauf was impossible to guard. He had a release so fast that contesting his shot barely mattered. He had a crossover that happened in a phone booth. He had speed that belonged in a different era. But the 1990s NBA was built to destroy players like him. Hand checking was legal. Defenders could put their hands on your body and steer you wherever they wanted. The game was slower, more physical, more brutal, and Abdul-Rauf weighed 160 pounds. He was fighting a war every night against defenders who knew exactly how to break him. Not just physically, mentally. These 5 defenders attacked his rhythm, his confidence, and his focus. They made him work for everything, and that's why he respects them. Let's start with the player Abdul-Rauf, called the dirtiest he ever faced, John Stockton. Most people think of Stockton as the clean-cut point guard who ran the pick and roll with Karl Malone, the guy with the assist record, the fundamental player who never did anything wrong. Abdul-Rauf saw something completely different. He saw a master of the dark arts. Stockton used every illegal move in the book. He set screens that weren't really screens. He moved his feet. He stuck out his knees. He dropped his shoulder into you when you weren't looking. Abdul-Rauf said Stockton would drift into his path and deliver a chip, a calculated collision designed to stop you cold. These weren't accidents. They were weapons. Over 48 minutes, those little hits added up. Your legs got tired, your core got bruised, your lift disappeared. And Stockton knew exactly what he was doing. But it wasn't just the screens. Stockton used hip checks. When Abdul-Rauf tried to drive past him, Stockton would extend his hip into his thigh or midsection. It threw off your center of gravity. And because it wasn't done with the hands, officials didn't call it. Stockton also used subtle elbows. In close quarters, he would place a rigid forearm or elbow into your ribs or solar plexus. It kept you from getting into your shooting pocket comfortably. Abdul-Rauf called these the dark arts. Techniques that lived in the gray areas of officiating. Stockton couldn't match Abdul-Rauf's speed, so he leveled the playing field by being dirty. And it worked most nights. But not on December 7th, 1995. That night, Abdul-Rauf walked into the Delta Center in Utah and dropped 51 points on Stockton and the Jazz. He shot 63% from the field. He made 9 3-pointers. He went 8 for 8 from the free throw line. It was a masterclass in how to beat the dark arts. Abdul-Rauf extended his range. He pulled up from 25 to 28 feet, way beyond the three-point line. Stockton's tricks only worked up close. The hip checks and elbows were effective within 20 feet of the basket. But in open space, they became obvious. Stockton had to chase, and in a foot race, Abdul-Rauf was faster. When Stockton pressed up to contest the shot, Abdul-Rauf blew past him with the crossover. When Stockton sagged off to prevent the drive, Abdul-Rauf fired with his lightning quick release. He forced Stockton to defend him honestly. And when that happened, Abdul-Rauf was unstoppable. The 51-point game wasn't just revenge. It was respect. Abdul-Rauf understood why Stockton played dirty. Guards like Abdul-Rauf and Allen Iverson were faster and more athletic than anything Stockton's generation had seen. Stockton had to adapt or become irrelevant, so he adapted. He used intelligence and grit to stay elite. Abdul-Rauf calling him dirty was a form of respect. It meant Stockton had found a way to compete even when his body couldn't keep up. If you're learning something new about these legends, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me which defender you think gave Abdul-Rauf the most trouble. I want to hear your take. Now let's talk about Gary Payton, the glove, the only point guard to ever win Defensive Player of the Year. Abdul-Rauf called Payton a nightmare, and it wasn't just because of his defense, it was because of his mouth. Payton didn't just guard you, he tried to break you. Payton had lateral quickness that matched Abdul-Rauf step for step. Most defenders couldn't stay in front of Abdul-Rauf. He was too fast. But Payton could slide his feet laterally without crossing them. He mirrored every move. Abdul-Rauf's biggest weapon was speed, and Payton neutralized it. On top of that, Payton was 6'4". Abdul-Rauf was 6'1". Payton used that length to harass the dribble. He poked the ball away. He forced Abdul-Rauf to pick up his dribble early. Just bringing the ball up the court became exhausting. But the real weapon was psychological warfare. Payton talked nonstop. He commented on your family, your skills, your mistakes, your tics. Abdul-Rauf had Tourette's syndrome. He needed rhythm and focus to play at his best. He operated in a flow state. Peyton's trash talk was designed to pull him out of that state. It forced Abdul-Rauf to engage in a mental battle instead of focusing on basketball, and that's when mistakes happened. Peyton's talk wasn't random. It was strategic. Every word had a purpose: to distract, to frustrate, to make you think about him instead of your game. In the 1994 playoffs, Peyton proved just how dominant he could be. The Nuggets upset the Sonics in the first round. It was the first time an 8 seed beat a 1 seed, but people forget that Peyton shut Abdul-Rauf down during key stretches of that series. The Nuggets coaching staff had to bench Abdul-Rauf in crunch time. They used backup guard Robert Pack to close games instead. That's how effective Peyton was. He didn't just contest shots, he made an elite scorer strategically useless. Abdul-Rauf led the team in scoring, but in the biggest moments, he couldn't play because of what Peyton did to him. That's domination. Years later, Peyton became Abdul-Rauf's coach in the Big Three League. At first, Peyton didn't even want to play him. Maybe he underestimated how good Abdul-Rauf still was, or maybe old biases carried over. It took injuries to other players before Peyton finally put Abdul-Rauf in the lineup, and Abdul-Rauf immediately proved he was still an elite scorer. The dynamic between them never fully changed. Even after their playing days, there was that lingering tension, but also respect. Peyton knew what Abdul-Rauf could do. He had seen it up close. Then there was Joe Dumars, the silent fortress. Abdul-Rauf said he couldn't stand facing Dumars. Not because Dumars talked trash, because he didn't talk at all. Dumars was the opposite of Peyton. No emotion, no noise, just perfect execution. Dumars played with a low center of gravity. His stance was wide and grounded. When Abdul-Rauf tried to bump him or nudge him to create separation, Dumars didn't move. It was like running into a wall. Abdul-Rauf said it was impossible to move Dumars off his spot. That's because Dumars had incredible core strength. He could absorb contact without fouling. He never bit on pump fakes. He never overreacted. He just stayed in front of you and waited for you to make a mistake. The silence was a psychological weapon. Against Peyton, you got constant feedback, anger, emotion, trash talk. You could use that as fuel. It gave you something to fight against. Dumars gave you nothing. No fuel. No target for your competitive rage. Just robotic precision. He was one of the nice guys on the bad boy Pistons. That reputation made it hard to hate him. And if you couldn't build up hate, it was harder to elevate your game. You were stuck in a contest of pure skill against a technician who refused to make errors. The numbers back this up. Abdul-Rauf averaged his lowest points per game against Dumars, just 13.2 points on 40.8% shooting. Against Stockton, he averaged 15.9 points on 44.2% shooting. Against Peyton, 14.8 points on 41.5%. Against Jordan, 13.9 points on 42.9%. Against Blaylock, 16.5 points on 45.1%. Dumars held him to the worst numbers across the board. The Silent Fortress was mathematically the toughest matchup Abdul-Rauf ever faced. No trash talk, no dirty tricks. Just strength, discipline, and perfect positioning. That's why Abdul-Rauf couldn't stand it. There was nothing to exploit. Nothing to push back against, just a defender who did everything right. Now let's talk about Michael Jordan. When Abdul-Rauf discussed Jordan, he didn't just talk about defense. He talked about the system, the aura, the intimidation factor. Jordan was a 9-time all-defensive first-team selection. His length and athleticism were obvious. But Abdul-Rauf said the real challenge was that Jordan's presence changed how the game was called. Officials were hesitant to call fouls on Jordan. Hand checks that would be fouls for other players were play on for Jordan. Body bumps and aggressive reaches that would send a rookie to the line didn't get called. This created an uphill battle for Abdul-Rauf. He had to beat Jordan's defense and the whistle. Every possession required a higher degree of difficulty. Driving to the rim meant absorbing contact without getting rewarded. So Abdul-Rauf adopted a mindset. He called it the kill MJ mindset. This wasn't arrogance, it was survival. Abdul-Rauf believed that showing any hesitation or deference would result in getting crushed. Jordan was 6'6" and would often guard Abdul-Rauf directly to use his length advantage. Abdul-Rauf's strategy was simple. Attack immediately. Use his quickness to get Jordan off of him. Force switches. Tire the bigger player. Don't give Jordan time to set his feet or establish control. On February 4th, 1996, Abdul-Rauf proved this mindset worked. The Chicago Bulls came to Denver with a 41-3 record and an 18-game winning streak. They were on pace to finish 72-10, the greatest regular season record in NBA history. The Nuggets won 105-99. Abdul-Rauf led the way with 32 points. He shot 13 of 27 from the field and 4 of 10 from 3. He attacked Jordan off the dribble. He used pull-up transition threes to prevent Jordan from setting his feet on defense. He scored 23 points in the first half. half and built a lead the Bulls couldn't overcome. Jordan scored 39 points in response, but it wasn't enough. This game showed that when Abdul-Rauf found his rhythm, he was uncheckable, even against the greatest player of all time, even against the aura, even against the whistle. Respect goes both ways. Finally, there's Mookie Blaylock, the ball hawk, the chaos creator. Abdul-Rauf called Blaylock one of the most annoying defenders he ever faced. Blaylock didn't play like Dumars or Stockton. He gambled constantly. He jumped passing lanes. He reached for steals. He ranks 4th all-time in steals per game at 2.33. For a point guard whose primary job is ball security, this created constant anxiety. Abdul-Rauf said he could never relax against Blaylock. Against Dumars, you knew he'd be in front of you. Against Blaylock, you didn't know if he'd lunge for the crossover or bait a pass. Every dribble required hyper-vigilance. It increased the mental tax of the game. Blaylock also picked up defenders 94 feet from the basket. Full court pressure. This drained energy before you even reached your offensive set. For a player with Abdul-Rauf's usage rate, that physical toll was significant. The constant gambling, the full court pressure, the unpredictability, it all added up to stress. Even when Abdul-Rauf scored well against Blaylock, the process was exhausting. The stats show Abdul-Rauf actually averaged his highest points per game against Blaylock in this group, 16.5 points on 45.1% shooting. That reveals the trade-off of Blaylock's style. The gambling that caused anxiety also created openings. If Blaylock missed a steal attempt, Abdul-Rauf was free to step into his deadly mid-range jumper. The annoyance wasn't about the result. It was about the stress of the process. Every possession felt like a trap waiting to spring. What makes Abdul-Rauf's story more painful is that we never got to see him adapt to these defenders in his prime. In 1996, at the peak of his powers, he was averaging 19.2 points and 6.8 assists. Then he made a decision that changed everything. He refused to stand for the national anthem. He viewed the flag as a symbol of oppression that conflicted with his Islamic faith. The league suspended him. He faced death threats. His home was burned down. He eventually reached a compromise to stand and pray, but the damage was done. His time as a featured star in the NBA was over. He was effectively blackballed. He played in Turkey and Japan while still in his prime. This adds weight to his memories of these defenders. And the data we have on Abdul-Rauf versus Stockton, Payton, Dumars, Jordan, and Blaylock is confined to a small window, mostly between 1991 and 1996. We never saw a veteran Abdul-Rauf with more experience and wisdom adapt his game over time. The sample size is that of a shooting star, brilliant, brief, and abruptly extinguished. His career was also shaped by Tourette's syndrome. He needed rhythm and perfection. Disrupting his internal timing wasn't just about stopping the ball, it was about disrupting his mind. The defenders he named understood this, whether through chaos like Blaylock, silence like Dumars, or rhythm-breaking physicality like Stockton. They attacked his specific vulnerability. Modern analysts call Abdul-Rauf the Steph Curry before Steph Curry. If he played in today's NBA, where hand-checking is banned and Stockton's hip checks would be flagrant fouls, his 51-point explosions might have been the norm. His battles against the dark arts of the 1990s show just how hostile that era was for small, skilled shooters. He was a prototype for the future trapped in a decade designed to destroy him. Abdul-Rauf's testimony about these 5 defenders gives us a complete picture of 1990s defense. It wasn't just toughness. It was diversity. Stockton brought physicality and the dark arts. Payton brought psychology and verbal assault. Dumars brought discipline and the silent wall. Jordan brought systemic intimidation and the aura. Blaylock brought chaos and the gamble. Abdul-Rauf navigated all of it. He scored 51 on the master of dirty play. He scored 32 on the icon of intimidation, despite his size. Despite his neurological challenges, despite a league that didn't protect players like him, that he fought these wars successfully and then got removed from the battlefield, for his conscience remains one of basketball's great what-ifs. These 5 defenders didn't just challenge Abdul-Rauf, they revealed his greatness, because only a truly elite player earns respect from legends. And Abdul-Rauf earned it from all 5. If this video made you see these players differently, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments which of these 5 you think was the toughest. Abdul-Rauf's respect for them is a reminder that greatness recognizes greatness, even when it's fighting against it.